because you don't have to be so clever, but it's more about psychology. Like, for example, you have to develop confidence, which is also good in research. But let's say you can be very good researcher and not confident. The higher IQ, the faster you count, the better you are, but that's absolutely not true because there are a lot of other factors. So actually that makes your development more complete, I would say, because you don't only develop on intellectual reading books, but you also think about other stuff like your character.
Welcome back to the Perpetual Growth Podcast, the show where we explore what it really takes to grow in business, leadership, health, and relationships, not just externally, but internally. Today's conversation sits at the intersection of science, entrepreneurship, and responsibility. My guest is Dr. Ewelina Kurtys, a neuroscientist turned entrepreneur and strategic advisor working at the frontier of biologically inspired computing and deep tech commercialization. Ewelina has published over 20 peer-reviewed papers advising cutting-edge companies like Final Spark and helps founders translate lab breakthroughs into real-world impact. What makes her unique isn't just her intellect, it's her ability to bridge worlds most people never cross: academia, entrepreneurship, and ethics. In this episode, we explore what happens when innovation moves faster than wisdom, why most breakthroughs fail to scale, and what responsibility leaders carry when they are shaping the future. This is a deep one, so let's dive in. Ewelina, you've moved from neuroscience and academic research into entrepreneurship and advising companies at the edge of what's possible. So looking back now, what moment or realization made you step out of the lab and say, this work needs to live in the real world?
I think I was always curious and I was always impressed by two things, by science and entrepreneurship. And more obvious was science at the beginning for me. I think it's easier to start with a PhD than first with entrepreneurship and after PhD. But I wanted always to go to industry and I wanted always to discover what else is there. What else can you do except for research? Because I was always a bit I felt a bit limited because in academia, although it's really fascinating, the work, but there is only one way to succeed, to be successful in academia, in my opinion, which is to become a professor. And there is, in my opinion, no other way. While in the industry, you have many ways. You can do a lot of things and you can adjust to your personality or your preference. So I was always interested to have more options. So I think it was a process, but I always was curious. I knew always I want to leave academia. So I think it was with me from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I love that. I completely understand. Yeah, give me an idea. If we're thinking from the lab to leadership, what do most people misunderstand about academic science?
Oh my God. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know. Um, I don't think I feel misunderstood when I do research. I actually was nice because when I did my PhD, and generally when I was a scientist, when every time I said to someone what I'm doing, they were always impressed.
Mhm.
And I think research is always kind of like impressing people, which
Mhm.
of course is not a good idea to live your life to impress others, yes. So
Yeah.
I think that absolutely doesn't mean it's better for you. But I've noticed this that I think at least people I met were always kind of like fascinated. Oh, you study brain. It was always so cool.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it's misunderstood. I never felt misunderstood.
Mhm.
What I can say later, actually, paradoxically, when you work in industry, then you can
Mhm.
be misunderstood because I think people don't always understand what you do, and yeah, I think it's much more enigmatic when you're actually in industry. Sometimes people have some ideas about well, if you're a researcher, then it's just nice. Difficult,
Yeah.
it sounds difficult, and it's cool.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I'm curious for you. Do you feel like breakthroughs often die after publication?
Oh, I never thought that way. I don't think so. No, why? I really don't think so. I think what is definitely you see in the academia is that it's driven by publication, publish or perish. Is not always good because
Mhm.
it doesn't stimulate long-term research. because for long-term research, you might need 10 years for a publication, but that's very difficult if you need funding. And I also think it's, of course, a big problem, which many people recognize, is that it doesn't support negative results. So we don't publish what didn't work, which
Right.
actually has some reason because it's much more difficult to prove statistically, to prove that something doesn't exist than to prove that something is the case if you measure this. So maybe this pressure for publications, of course, is difficult. But I don't know what would be the alternative, because if you don't have pressure for publications, then how you make sure that people are working? So I think I don't have better alternative. But yes, for sure there is a pressure, and that is promoting some kind of research, which is easy to publish. So what is easy to publish? Something what gives you results within, let's say, 1 or 2 years. So, for example, research like we do in Final Spark wouldn't be possible in academia. And actually, I talked with some professors. It's funny, they told me they would never go for it because it's too risky, because it might not work. We need 10 years to build biocomputer, and what if it doesn't work? So yes, so I think in academia, academia promotes more the easy and sure steps forward.
Yeah. So, I mean, from what I'm hearing from you in certain contexts, it feels like it puts you into a box where you're limited in what you can accomplish if you're going to follow the like quote unquote conventional route. Am I hearing that correctly?
No, I don't think so. I actually think it's just that there's different business,
Mhm.
industry and academia. And in industry, it's okay to risk more, to take a higher risk because you take usually private money, and private person can decide to do whatever they want with the money. But in academia, you usually use public money, and I think for public money, it's okay that there are some restrictions, and that you have to take the projects which are the most, let's say, sure to work out, and also which benefit the public, because often when you do proposals or also when you publish papers, and to show that it's important what you do, you say, oh, how many people, for example, suffer from some disease, so you maybe find a solution. So I think it's fair, it's totally fair, because if you use public money, it should be somehow controlled, so that it can benefit to the public.
Mm.
But
Sure.
in entrepreneurship you have more freedom, but also because people who decide to take a risk, I think they are few, and they can take responsibility for this. That's different.
Hmm. Yeah. No, that is really fascinating. I mean, it makes complete sense in those contexts. I mean, when you phrase it so simply, it's when we're leveraging the public's money, we need to be more scrutinizing and focus on the tasks and
Mhm.
objectives that have the greatest likelihood of producing the outcome or result that we desire. But
Yes,
entrepreneurship is where, from what I'm hearing, I mean, the most profound and tremendous breakthroughs come through, but they're also where we're exposed to the highest amount of risk because now the
yes.
probability of success rates dissolve. So that's a really interesting outlook. Now, before we dive into biocomputing, I'm curious for you more about your emotional journey, the identity shift that you went through. I mean, and what I mean from that by that is going from scientist to entrepreneur. That's a pretty darn big shift. What has that been like for you? How has that shown up?
I think it's all in trial and error. You just try different things, you discover on every step. And I think the biggest change when you move to industry, to startups, is that it's more psychological than intellectual. Because you don't have to be so clever, but it's more about psychology. You like, for example, you have to develop confidence, which is also good in research. But let's say you can be very good researcher and not confident. But in
Hmm.
entrepreneurship, you wouldn't do this. So I think it's more about psychological side. I would say that. And actually, I learned when I left academia how important are other things. It's not just about intellect. Before I was thinking, oh yeah, like the smarter you are, the higher IQ, the faster you count, the better you are. But that's absolutely not true, because there are a lot of other factors. So actually, that makes your development more complete, I would say, because you don't only develop on intellectual reading books, but you also think about other stuff like your character, your I don't know, your confidence, interaction with other people, and things like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because there are some parallels and at the same time unique contrast because um, y- y- uh, applying systems and processes to entrepreneurship, just like we do in science, is I think one of the necessary um, I mean systemic functions that makes a business really successful. And at the same time, what I'm hearing you saying is there's more of an evolution in personality that had to evolve, and trust and faith and confidence, I think was the primary word that you used, um, in order to be successful long term. So that's an evolution in the person and the mindset, which I think is really, really fantastic. Now, shifting gears for you, like what, w- w- how could you explain like what biocomputing is and living neurons are in just plain English for the audience?
Yes, absolutely. So biocomputing, we try to build computers from living neurons. So we use living neurons the same as we have in our brains,
Mm-hmm.
just a building block. So we don't try to reproduce the brain, but we just take the building blocks because we know that they're very efficient, very good at processing information. And we want to build a computer which will use 1 million times less energy than digital computers.
Wow. And that's a huge feat because if I'm not mistaken, I mean, that's one of the biggest downfalls to
Yes.
today's or computing is just the energy that it takes to run those processors and everything, right? So you're saying it's potentially up to a million times more efficient and effective, and that's amazing. And of course, when you're talking about neurons being one of the most effective means for computing as opposed to like traditional silicon, as an example, or what have you. What is it? What my brain's having a hard time wrapping itself around is why is it that the brain remains unmatched between conventional silicon that's being used today, and then where are these neurons living? I'm having a hard time imagining them outside of a brain, if that makes sense. What is that? We look at circuit boards. Are these somehow embedded on a circuit board? Is there another medium that they're in altogether? What does that physically look like?
Um, so it's actually quite common to keep neurons in the lab, nothing new, because many people do this for biomedical research. So we keep them on the dish. In this case, we keep them on electrodes
Mm-hmm.
because we want to be able to have communication with them, two sides. We send them electrical signals and we can also measure the signals from neurons. And they, of course, have to be in special temperature, the same as in the human body. They need to always be in the liquid. They always need nutrient supply. Like every living cell, you have to be sure they have right condition. And what we believe is that neurons will not totally replace silicon, but it will be complementary and will be suitable for some specific tasks. And we can have idea about neurons, about biocomputers, looking at the human brain and what the human brain is doing very well. So you can imagine that it could be good to use a biocomputer for solving very complex tasks with very little energy. So that's what we aim for. So we think that generative AI maybe will be very good application actually for biocomputers.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So that's actually what was going to be one of my next questions is
Mhm.
what applications do you anticipate this new technology, so to speak, biocomputing being applied to first and having the highest rates of efficacy and success? And how far along are we? I mean, is this something that we are presently using just at a significantly smaller scale? Are we, days, weeks, months, years away from mass implementation? Like where are we at in that timeline, and what industries do you see this affecting most first? I mean, I know you just mentioned regenerative AI. Talk more about that if you would.
Yes, so definitely we think that every task where maybe the speed is not crucial because neurons are not fast, but they are good at very efficient solving problems, complex problems. So we
Mm,
would imagine that some of the tasks of LLMs could be optimal for a living neuron, for a living computer. Of course, this is all speculation because we have not built yet the computer, So far, we managed to store 1 bit of information. So this is very early stage. And now everything what we assume about biocomputers is based on how human brain is working. So not so it has to be still confirmed by the reality.
So what I'm interested about in that context is, I mean, there's the mechanical aspects of the way the brain works. Where does quantum computing apply to this? What about, I mean, aspects of quantum physics? Like, are there ways that you anticipate that we will be utilizing this technology that we can't even see or understand yet? And that AI may even help us further develop and enhance. One of the things that stood out to me too, not to go too ADD on you, but that is how you said it's significantly more efficient biocomputing. However, the speed is much slower, and that the brain is much slower. That is something I was not aware of, or wouldn't have guessed or anticipated. So, yeah, I get, where
Yes,
to
yes, I know what you
speak a
mean.
little bit more about that if you would. Yeah.
Yes, but still per task, you get efficiency, energy efficiency. So it's just that neurons have these traits that they are not fast in processing information. We have to remember that, just to be honest. And but still per task. For example, if you would like to reproduce the workings of the human brain, you would need small nuclear plant. So still, brain can solve problems, even if it does it slower. It can solve them much with much less energy.
Mm, mm. Okay. Um, and then, is there are there aspects of quantum mechanics, quantum computing that go into development of this new technology, or is that how does that play into this conversation?
Well, I don't know too much about quantum. I think I would consider this as a separate field.
Hmm.
Quantum computers are actually very fast. So
Hmm.
they are expected to be fast, and this is totally different technology. So what
Hmm.
is common is that it's totally new hardware. So encoding, everything will be different. Uh, and processing information and how you will code, how you interact with these machines will be different. And they will be complementary to digital. But that's all what is in common. But for the rest, the mechanism is totally different, and these are
Hmm.
totally different technologies.
Hmm. Okay. So at this stage, you're also saying that we've basically just become, I mean, the first step was we've been able to store data. So does that mean we have not
Mhm.
actually created communication or interaction synthesization yet? Like, what does that look like? What I'm trying to wrap my head around is things like the real constraints that you're facing right now, from energy, I would imagine scalability. What about predictability? I mean, what are the biggest struggles what are the things that you're trying to overcome right now when it comes to the next evolution in biocomputing?
So we can interact with neurons. This is really very robust and established in our lab. You can send them signal, you can receive the response.
Hmm.
You can do a lot of experiments with that, but what is the problem is that it's very difficult to control them. So for now, it's difficult to have a reproducible sequence, like you send a signal, you get a response, always the same. This is very difficult. And we store 1 bit information just because that was maybe the easiest what we managed to do. But it's very difficult to program neurons. So our objective is actually learning in vitro. So we would like to be able to teach neurons so that they change connections between each other, because that's learning, that's memory in neurons. And in this way, they could store information we wanted. So that's the objective. But it's very difficult because neurons are not stable and because nobody knows how they encode information. So we don't really know what all this activity of neurons, what does it mean? We can measure this, but we don't understand.
That is fascinating. So what's next? I mean, how do you take something that is currently unpredictable and try to create a tool that creates consistent outputs when we're still learning how it all works? I mean, um, so I mean, it sounds to me like we're still very much at the infantile stages of development. I mean, I don't like to use that word. That might not be the most appropriate, but we're still at the early stages of development when it comes to biocomputing. Um, Where do you what what's got you excited in terms of future horizons? Like what where do you see things starting to be integrated first and next?
I think learning in vitro, which I mentioned you now, will be very exciting, I think, when we solve it. And generally, we plan, 10 years of research of or building computers. There are many stages. First
What
is
when you
learn.
say I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say learning in vitro, can you expand on that a bit? What does that mean for all of
Yes,
us?
so in vitro means on the dish because we have neurons on the dish, not in the
Hmm.
body.
Hmm.
And we want to teach them something. As I mentioned before, you teach neurons by changing connections between them. So we want to solve this problem. We want to figure out how to stimulate them with electrical or chemical signals. So we can send some molecules or electrical signals to neurons. And how to do this in such a way so that they change connections and they can store some specific information.
Hmm.
So this will be totally different way of processing. It's not like a zero ones in a silicon,
Right.
but this will be information stored in the, sorry, my cat. Yes, the star, yes. This will be totally different way of storing and processing information than in silicon. In silicon, we have
Hmm.
logic gates, electrons flow through them, and in neurons, you have connections between neurons and spikes. So this is electrical activity of neurons, and this is how they encode information by spiking. So they are active. So it's in time and space. So because it matters in brain where and when neurons is active. This is information. So we have to figure out how this exactly works so that we can program them, so that we can send them some specific signals so they change the connection in the way how we want. So if we can control this, that would be a huge revolution. Also for medicine, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, does that move us closer in theory to learning and understanding more how the brain works? Are you focused?
Yes.
What excites you more? I mean, learning more about how the brain is actually working or the actual potential future applications of the science or
No,
both?
I think making a computer would be extremely exciting because this is something which doesn't exist yet, and it would be really a game changer. So I would be very excited to see this computer.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I'm like trying to envision this in my mind because I'm imagining, traditional computer hardware as most of us imagine it and see it today. And then these, petri dishes with living neurons, right? And it's like, what does that integration look like? I mean, I have to imagine that your laboratory is a fascinating room to walk into. How are those two worlds colliding?
So I think for us the most important is the engineering actually to build the device, and we focus on that because there are a lot of exciting scientific information we can get, but that's actually not the purpose for Final Spark, because our purpose is not so much to understand how brain works, it's only to make a machine which works. So we want, if we are able to program neurons and we don't know exactly how, but it works, then we are happy. But of course, it's possible that by building this machine, we will discover a lot of things which are useful for neuroscience, and we are happy then to share this. But our objective is to build a machine, so we have more this engineering approach. We
Yeah,
often
yeah.
use trial and error, so we don't try to always use the scientific method as university that you try to always understand how things work. But because we have not so much time, because you want to make huge revolution in 10 years. Uh,
Hmm.
so, uh, so this has to be done much faster than academic research, which is very careful, very incremental.
Hmm.
Uh, it's just different, work differently. So then you
Yeah,
have to understand things. But in our case, we don't always have time to understand things. We just want
yeah,
that to work, which
yeah.
is typical
No,
how engineers are thinking actually when they try to build a new device.
yeah. Well, and then it's refine and iterate, right? Because the initial versions are usually going to be larger, clunkier, less effective and efficient than they need to
Yes.
be, and they can evolve over time. But that's really interesting because that's a fascinating distinction between the two processes where, academia, you are trying to understand everything that happens, and then in engineering, it's like, hey, we just got to figure out what works, and then we can go back and figure out why it works later on, which makes complete sense because you're right. I mean, it's speed to market and execution. So I love that. that you're speaking about that too, because I think there's so many parallels here in business. Is so many people think that they have to come in with a perfectly laid plan, but more often than not, you got to figure out what works, and then not to be trite, but do more of it. And
Yes.
frankly, and so there's a lot of parallels in engineering science then too, which I think is really really interesting. And another thing that I hear you saying that I don't know if a lot of people are connecting on right now is. Um, as you're speaking, you're like, oh, in a very short period of time, 10 years. Well, to most people, 10 years feels like an eternity. They can't even imagine what their life and health
You
and
are right.
body,
You are right.
but you're like, oh, 10 years, man, that's a short period of time. And in reality, taking a step back, yeah, 10 years is just a blip in our overall, cosmic
Yes.
history, right? So I love that long-term perspective, and that to you still feels like a high urgency window.
Yes, absolutely. So for investors also, it's a big challenge because it's very long time for them. But actually, when you think about revolution, that's very short to make a
Yeah.
revolution.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Interesting. Um, you know, I, talk to me about this, like from your experience, um, when we're talking about, business and entrepreneurship and
Mhm.
science, where do you feel that founders have the potential to break trust with science? Is there a dividing line? Is there a point in time where somebody is most likely to experience this?
No, I think if you want to have trust, you have to be very transparent in what you're doing. And usually, people who are honest, they can very well explain what they do, how they did it, and all the details. So I think it's a general rule I follow. And I think also this is what we do at Final Spark. We try to be very transparent. You can see on finalspark.com, our website, you can see section live, for example, and you can see the view from the camera from our lab. You can also see signals from the neurons in real time. So we try to be as much transparent as possible because I think people are afraid of things which they don't understand. And if you try to explain this to the public, then you can gain trust and confidence in
Yeah.
the direction of this.
That's it's interesting because what I hear in that is what you're describing isn't just like a science problem, so to speak. It's almost a leadership problem. I mean, and in business, we often reward speed, certainty, confidence. In science, uncertainty is the starting point. In your mind, like how should leaders, especially founders and executives, think differently when they're building something that affects human systems and not just the markets?
No, I think it's always the same. You have to be transparent and also take into consideration all the suggestions from the public because, for example, because we work with living neurons, which is living material, we get a lot of questions from the public, which are also on ethics and the future of technology. So we, for example, get in touch with philosophers to help us to answer all these questions. So I think it's important to listen because sometimes unresolved questions from the public can put you in trouble, that your technology can be banned, for example. So it's very important to have this constant communication with the public and monitor what they say and also try to bring answers. And if you cannot answer yourself, then it's good to ask experts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think transparency, which we could also label as vulnerability, is a superpower in business and life, and one that's often underutilized. I mean, kind of goes back to something you were saying earlier. I mean, everybody wants to focus on the successes, but the failures and shortcomings teach us just as much if we're looking at things correctly.
Yes.
From a standpoint of responsibility, ethics, and the future of intelligence, like someone that's working with living neural systems and AI adjacent technologies, where do you personally draw the line between innovation and responsibility?
Well, I think it's case by case, so you always have to try to communicate, for example, with philosophers of technology. What are the implications of the technology you are building? And try to prepare for this because every new thing will bring new questions and new challenges which we didn't exist before. And if you want to make it ethical, you just have to address the questions on the ongoing basis. You cannot predict it. So this is why also legislation and everything is behind the the technology development, which I think is okay, because you cannot find solutions before you have a problem. So you first have to see how technology is evolving, and then on the rolling basis, you have to be able to address any kind of ethical questions if they arise.
What in your mind, what questions aren't people asking enough yet?
I don't know. I don't know honestly, because we have just different way of thinking. So we see a positive side of our work, and usually people from outside show us what can be wrong, because
Yeah,
we don't have we have very good intention. We have a dream about a good technology.
yeah,
So I think usually it's the people from outside who have some ideas how this can be used in the bad way.
yeah, yeah. No, that's very true. I want to just take a step back for a moment and have you go back to the beginning, wherever that is for you. When what was the moment in time that you decided on biocomputing, and what was it where you were like, this is the opportunity, this is my why, this is my purpose, this is my thing to pursue? Because again, you look at that 10-year timeline, and most people would be extremely intimidated by that, right? And with you, I see passion, I see purpose, I see fulfillment. Like you're excited about what you don't know. And that's the exact thing that most people tend to run away from. What is it about biocomputing that gets you out of bed? What is it that where you're like, this is my thing?
Well, first I have to say that because people often say that, oh yes, it's so challenging to work on 10-year project, but actually for me, it's not. I don't take risk working, because for me, working on such an innovative project is actually privilege, and it's great.
Hmm.
So it's not me to take a risk. Actually, the risk is financial for those who pay for this research. So
Hmm.
currently, these are the founders, Fred Jordan and Martin Kuter. So the question is more for them, because they really take risk, because they spend money which they might lose if things wouldn't go good. So I think it's mostly on investment side, because I think anyone else involved in the project is actually benefiting from it, just because it's so innovative and interesting.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Second thing, how I started is I met the founders on one of the conferences in London. Um, that was AI Summit. At the time, it was really interesting conference, because it was before LLMs. So there was a lot of variety in AI, a lot of interesting projects going on. Now you practically reduce all the discussion about AI. We reduce to LLMs, to large language models. So it gets more boring, but at that time it was still exciting. And why I become interested in the project, because it's a combination of my academic expertise in neuroscience and my industry expertise in AI and technology. So I thought it's perfect.
Interesting. I love that. This seems like a random question, but hopefully you can follow me on this. Are you familiar with Parkinson's law?
I heard about this, but I don't remember what is this.
No, no problem at all. So, I mean, in summary, Parkinson's law is basically states that the amount of time that we allocate to any given project, goal, or outcome is the amount of
Ah,
time that will take to actually accomplish it. So, by shortening or shrinking that window to a much, smaller period of time, in many cases, we can accomplish the same outcomes just by simply saying, "Hey, I've only got a year instead of 10." Where does that philosophically align with you? I mean, you probably be like, holy bananas. I mean, I can't go to this is a moonshot, right? Um, like is that at all applicable? Like if you were conceptually, if you were trying to say, hey, the goals that we're trying to accomplish in 10 years, I want to accomplish in one, could you do it?
I think the Parkinson law has some limitation. For example,
Hmm.
imagine you speak French fluently, and the
Right.
fact that you say yourself that you want to do this in 1 week doesn't mean that it will happen in 1 week.
Hmm.
So I think there's some limitation to the
Hmm.
Parkinson law. So no, I don't think you can just wish for shorter and you get shorter. I think yes, it's true. I think this rule for sure works to some extent, but it has limitation. So
Yeah. I think more than anything, what it does is allows us to challenge paradigms, right? I love,
yes, absolutely.
I'm think, is it Ryan Halliday? I believe it's Ryan
Mhm.
Halliday, the author. 10x is offer is better than 2x, and the science of scaling,
Oh,
and philosophically, that's one of the things that he talks about. I mean, he doesn't speak directly to Parkinson's law, but conceptually, it's the same idea. Is where what it takes for us to build a $20 million business is the same amount of time, energy, and effort that it takes to build a $2 million business. You're just solving bigger problems and addressing bigger challenges sooner. And I think that's one of the paradigm shifts that I received from it is, same amount of bandwidth, but why not just reach higher to begin with? And I mean, not to say that you already aren't. Like you're obviously tackling a very big problem, or I guess I should certainly say a really huge opportunity. A few takeaways that I've taken from today, and then I want to ask you one question as we wrap up. So, I mean, one thing that I received from this conversation is breakthroughs really don't scale without translation. Like innovation fails not because the science is weak, but because leaders can't translate complexity into trust, clarity, and application. I mean, you talked so much about transparency before. Another big thing I took was intelligence without wisdom is a liability. Whether it's AI or leadership, speed without reflection amplifies risk. So growth requires restraint as much as ambition. We have to have that's one of those many dichotomies in business. We have to have balance. And then the third one for me was the future belongs to bridge builders. The most valuable leaders aren't necessarily specialists or generalists. They're translators who can connect disciplines, people, and purpose. And you've done a really great job of bridging all those gaps. So, Ewelina, I'm curious when the work you're doing today is looked back on decades from now, not just by scientists but by society. What do you hope people will say that you helped humanity understand or do better?
well, building new type of computers, biocomputers,
Mhm. Okay, beautiful,
which is
beautiful.
already big topic, yes.
Yes, it is.
Introduced in the public, yes.
Yes. Well, Dr. Ewelina Kurtys, thank you so much for your depth, the humility, responsibility you bring
Thank
to
you
the
too.
work. You're very welcome. For all of our listeners, if this episode changed the way you think about innovation, leadership in the future, we'd love for you to share it with someone who's building something that matters. If you'd like to reach Dr. Ewelina, we will have all of her contact information and links in the show notes. But Dr. Ewelina, would you mind sharing where the best places people can reach you? What's the best way they can find out more about the work that you're doing?
Our website is great way. There are many contact forms, very easy to get in touch with us, and we answer every email we get.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, again, for our listeners, we'll have all of the contact information for Dr. Kurtys in the show notes. Remember, growth doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. Until next time, keep growing.